So astrology is actually one of my favorite topics, and for people who know me closely, I am somebody who always brings astrology into everyday life. I do follow moon transits. I do try to align some of my decisions and especially like big life decisions with astrology. I do use it a lot. Um, so this video might be a bit of a different perspective on it, and I feel like that perspective is much needed um, because with anything, whether that is astrology, religion, or any kind of ideology, point of view, political view, or something that it seems to be pretty harmless, just something that you believe in and hold true to yourself, it's always worth examining from multiple perspectives because and this is something that I'm going to talk in depth in this video. This video is actually more about human mind and something that we all do with information. But let me start from afar and talk about astrology specifically. So I was reading this book the other day, The Scattered Minds by Gabor Mate, if I pronounce his name right, hopefully. I really like his work, and this is not the first book I read by him, but it never came. It's actually one of his first books, and I never came around to reading it because it just didn't really feel like it would be very relevant to me. I identify with my mind being scattered a lot at times, hence why I'm so passionate about meditation. But the second part of the title, which goes about I can't remember the exact name, but it's about attention deficit disorder, so ADD. And for me, it just felt, I just never thought I have it, but also because I don't really identify with diagnosis, and honestly I'm not a fan of labels, and I just kind of feel like there is a lot of danger once you label something for the mind to identify with it. And what happens with that identification, first on subconscious level you reinforce it further, and second on a conscious level, well, it's not maybe sometimes very conscious, but it becomes almost automatic that we almost start to excuse our behavior because of our condition. And I'm not saying that it's not helpful to tell others about certain things about ourselves, whether we choose to call it ADD or something else, or a word, or we actually explain it in depth. I do feel like that's very valuable because people can understand us better. And I think a really good example of that is that More Than Love, that episode from More Than Love called Bipolar. It really struck me.
You're the first person I've ever told about this.
How does it feel telling me?
Like an elephant's taken one of its feet off my chest.
I'm so glad you've told me. It explains so much. If anything, not knowing made it a little difficult to connect with you fully, the way I would have wanted.
Yeah, there is so much value in sharing your vulnerability with others. And on the other hand, I also do believe that by knowing those things, it's, you do need sometimes compassion when you're dealing with those things, because it's harder for you than for other people to complete certain tasks, for instance, or to function in a certain way that others find super easy. So, there's kind of that side of a coin which I really want to acknowledge and not to kind of obscure or say it's not important, it is. But on the other hand, and I feel like this is just something we do in everyday life. I'm sure there is a maybe generalization. I'm trying to find the name. There's this, I think it's 11 cognitive biases that human mind has, and I'm sure this must be one of them because I think it comes up in so many aspects of our lives where we see something, and I guess in order to simplify it, we tend to lump things into that category and almost like explain it away by that. And this is why I have always resisted diagnosis. And ironically, though, I was still pretty okay with astrology, maybe because it felt like it gave me that flexibility. Because with astrology, at least, I know it's so in depth, unlike, I guess, neurology or, well, you see, I can't even find a word to describe it because I'm so, like, I don't know what I don't know, right, in the world of science. And I'm sure there is so much depth and particularity in that for a person who is educated in that. And the same for me in astrology, because I am very, to an extent, educated in it. I could, I see how specific and precise it can get. So for me, like to say that I'm Sun in Aries and all these other features, it's not really too, it doesn't feel so limited and defining. But on the other hand, I definitely see that generalization that happens, and I can see how it's been accelerated, I guess, through the use of social media. And I see so much stuff on Instagram and so many memes, but that are very relatable. But specifically, was so amazed after reading that book how much in myself, how unaware I was of this one thing that I completely disregarded as a trait of my personality. And this is something to do with the way Gabor Mate describes it is time blindness. And he describes this very specific skill that people lack, that people who have ADD lack, and this sense of urgency in the idea of the time as now and not now, and how it hasn't developed. Like that's how a child sees the time. It is a now or not now, and that's why when you tell a child we're gonna eat in a minute, it doesn't mean anything. A minute doesn't mean anything. It means infinity, basically. And him breaking it down like that was so eye-opening for me, because I have always struggled with time and being on time and understanding time. I'm always underestimating time, how long something is going to take me. Even right now, I'm recording this video, and yeah, it's just, I thought it was going to happen so much earlier today, and I had so many tasks planned, and only now I'm slowly thinking into realization that certain things won't happen today because there is just not enough time. And for me, it's very, very hard to grasp. It's almost like when the clock hit the time, like I had to be somewhere at 5, when the clock get to 5 is when I'm realizing, oh, I actually won't be able to make it, even though I could probably say the same thing even when it's like 5 minutes to 5 or 10 minutes to 5, but it almost doesn't register until it gets there, because now it's like, oh, it's now, and that thing was meant to be now, and I'm not there, so it's not happening. So I know it's on a rational level somewhere, I feel like I understand it, but it's very hard for me to grasp it in a moment. But long story short is that I always disregarded this as a trait of my personality, impulsivity, and the fact that I'm bad with time. It's just, I just felt like it's an Aries thing, and it's something that I seen so much in memes, but also like more in depth in astrology, too, and it's just made me think of how, like, oh wow, it's not really the thing itself. Like, it's almost doesn't matter which frame you apply to it. I could also keep, living my life and saying, well, it's just ADD. But I think that is the thing, whether you call something a name and settle for the fact that this is how it is, and I can't do anything about it, or it's like, this is how it is, which is why it's because of this, whatever frame you choose, like whether that's astrology or ADD, or there might be other perspectives into this same topic. And then you say, but I'm trying to change it, but I'm trying to work on it and change it, and actually work on it and change it. And I feel like this is almost the catch-22 that is so difficult sometimes to overcome and see in ourselves, because like there is so many things that we just assign to our personality. But what is personality? It's just something that we constantly repeat. It's just a repetition in our psyche. And something that I really, really loved was an article that I read when I was in academia by Judy Butler. I can't remember the name of the article right now, but she was talking about gender. And I guess this was the most compelling argument for gender I have ever heard, because she really kind of broke it down to psychology, and just it's almost like what you have in your psyche is that model of how to be, and you repeat it, and through that repetition it becomes a category, and that category becomes gender, right? And whether that's male or female, or whether that's like both, and stepping out of that category is so hard, but it also means there are so limitless possibilities. It's just the repetition that we almost identify with, and I believe that is pretty much the same for any category. And I do kind of want to say that there is something fundamental about personality. There is certain things that are specific and unique to each one of us, and I guess you can see a little bit of that with pets or animals, how they all seem to have a different personality, and I wouldn't want to kind of break it all down to genes and biology and the environment or something that kind of influences how a person or a pet becomes or shows up in a way. But at the same time, knowing how many parts of your personality are not really your personality but just a repetition, and then conscious loop of repetition, is both scary but also liberating. Scary because it feels like you're realizing the own prison of your mind, boxes that you are trapped in and have been trapped in so long, and then it can also be very disorientating. It's almost like, who am I outside those boxes? But it's also liberating in some way, because you are so many things and you can be so many things, and there is just so much potential to be in. But again, I don't want to make an overly positive video and to say that those things are not real, like ADD is not real, and it's just like, I'm sure there is some kind of biology, there is some kind of chemical reactions in the brain, but I think, like Gabor Mate, I also believe that we can reverse it, and I do believe that we reverse it, yes, by creating a certain environment that will support, that will provide the right conditions, but also, I feel like what is environment? Environment is also what we do, what we say to ourselves on a daily basis, what activities we engage in, And before even reading this book, I have been noticing that I'm not diagnosed, but whether I do have ADD or not, it has been getting better, and some days is better than other days. And something that I have been noticing for me personally, it's when I make time, like more time of silence and meditation and time to myself. I feel like this is the time when I feel more grounded, and it's easier for me to orient myself in the time and space. It's easier for me to be like, okay, we're not going to do this today, we're going to do this later, and be okay with that, because usually it's almost like that urgency of things needing to happen now. And yeah, and that's been really interesting to observe, because yes, I am kind of been walking in the dark, because I didn't know that it's a thing, and in some way feeling so understood and heard by reading that book feels amazing. But at the same time, it's like the author says, it's just a map. It's just something that helps me to orient myself, and like, okay, I'm aware I have this thing. And now that kind of confirmation is reaffirming in the sense that I know I have been doing something right with my environment, or with what I have been doing to start reversing things, and it's almost like a signal to continue moving in the same direction. So but go back to astrology, I kind of want to review a few examples, just because I feel like it's always better to have examples. And so there is this meme I came across the other day, and I think this one is just of a series of really relatable, but literally could be any sign, pretty much any sign could be written over it. And I don't think it has anything to do with astrology at all. Once you get attached to someone, their mood starts depending on how that person treats them. They notice everything, every small thing. I feel like that just screams to me anxious attachment, unresolved childhood trauma, the fact that you're so focused outwards on another person just because they change their behavior. Yeah, that just feels very unhealthy. And again, like, using astrology to obscure those things. And I think this, like, that's the thing. It could also be like ADD problems, right? It could be almost any label as soon as somewhat applies. And I'm sure maybe people with ADD do struggle with that, because boundaries is one of the things I do struggle with. But, it's almost like, okay, so what do we do with it? What comes out from that realization? And I think what really needs to come out is some kind of acknowledgement of your childhood trauma, and some kind of motivation or inspiration to look deeper. Because essentially, by having things that constantly affirm your own biases in reality and your categories in your psyche, the one that you assign maybe to your personality, or that might be very true, and your diagnosis, by continuously reaffirming them, there is that big danger to continue looking outwards for that confirmation and almost like reassurance that it's okay, but not really trying to look deeper inwards and resolve those things. So one thing in that Modern Love episode is also something I have been thinking about, because it seems like it was very like the approach to healing there was very kind of Western medical fashion. It's almost like a very strong emphasis on healing with pharmaceuticals, and but I mean, of course, it's an episode, and it's always based on a true story. I don't know the whole story, but the way it's portrayed is there is no of that kind of inner exploration. There is an exploration of how it affects relationships and people around her, and how coming out and sharing that vulnerability actually helped her. But it doesn't explore that other aspect of looking inwards and really trying to come to terms with the trauma or with those things inside that might be coming outside, that reflecting in the outside as symptoms, as a certain disorder, but really it's that inner, I don't want to call it just an inner conflict, but it's those contents of the selves inside of us that are creating a certain conflict in the psyche. And I feel like bipolar is such a great example of that, because there are almost just two different realities which are so conflicted with each other, right? And we see that perfectly in how she even, like, one part of her talks about the other part of her, and that isolation of one part to the other part. And I feel like, again, I'm not here to treat, but I think just from my personal experience and things I have experienced, I feel like the parts work would be so beneficial here. So yeah, this was just a short, is it short? Not so short, but this was just a video to kind of explore that bias. I don't even know what it is. It's generalization, confirmation bias, all kind of lumped together, but I guess this the human psyche tendency to get stuck in those categories and to continue that repetition and to seek the confirmation of those categories in the outwards reality.